Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Keller and Heckman's webinar, Deeming Regulation Compliance, FDA Registration and Product Listing, Health Document Submissions, and Ingredient Reporting for E-Liquids and Vapor Devices. Today's webinar will be presented by attorneys Azim Chowdhury and Ben Wolf. We anticipate the webinar lasting about an hour to an hour and 10 minutes, with time built in for questions at the end. All lines have been muted. However, please do make sure to mute your line on your end as well. Should you have a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature that can be found on the right-hand side of your screen, which we will be monitoring. And now I'd like to turn it over to partner at Keller & Heckman, Azim Chowdhury.
Thank you, Justine, for that introduction. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so I'm just going to get right into it. But first, because we're a law firm, I am going to read this brief disclaimer that this presentation is not legal information. It is not legal advice. But it is just legal information. If you have questions about the application of the law to your specific circumstance, please let us know and we can provide you with legal advice. But this presentation itself is just the views of myself and my colleague Ben Wolf, and not that of our clients. For those of you who don't know me, my name again is Azim. I'm a partner here at Keller & Heckman. We're based in Washington, D.C. I practice in the area of food and drug law with a focus on e-vapor products. And I have been focusing on e-vapor products since really the early days, since 2010, when the products first started becoming more popular and questions about their legal status started to arise. I've written numerous articles on the FDA regulation of vapor products, and you can find more about our practice and what we've done in this space on our website, www.khlaw.com. I'm also joined by my colleague, Ben Wolf. Ben joined us last year from the FDA, where he was a regulatory counsel in the Center for Tobacco Products, as well as the Office of Regulatory Affairs. In Ben's role as regulatory counsel at FDA, he worked closely with CTP, ORA, as well as the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, and the Office of Combination Products, where he worked on implementing policies, including tobacco compliance and enforcement, pre-market review, and medical device issues. We are very glad to have Ben with us now at Keller & Heckman with his experience. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to give you some brief background on the deeming rule. We're going to talk about some new compliance deadlines. When we sent out the initial invitation for this webinar several weeks ago, we had some deadlines coming up around the corner, and those have been pushed back just a bit, which we'll get into. In terms of the actual Tobacco Control Act requirements that we're going to provide a summary of and demonstration of, we're focusing that on the registration and product listing requirement that applies to U.S. manufacturing establishments. We're going to talk about the health document notification, and then we're going to go through the ingredient listing requirements. And then we're going to follow that up with demonstrations using the FDA FURLS system for registration and the eSubmitter and CTP Portal for the health document notification and ingredient listing. I do want to make a quick note that a couple months ago in February, we had a comprehensive 2-day seminar here in our Washington, D.C. offices for our inaugural e-vapor law symposium. That symposium, the replay of that symposium, where we talked about some of the issues that we're going to go over here today on this webinar, but a whole bunch of other things, including the PMTA, the status of the litigation, and other areas of the law, not FDA specific, that e-vapor companies need to be aware of. Sorry about that. Let me just close that out. But you can purchase the replays of those of that symposium on the URL provided here on your screen, so jot that down. That's being sponsored by Vape Mentors. So please check that out if you have any questions or you want to see the full agenda for our symposium from earlier this year. Okay, so for the deeming rule background, the rule was published tomorrow, a year from tomorrow, May 10th. Exactly a year ago. It became effective 90 days later in August of 2016. And what that rule did briefly is it deemed all currently unregulated or then unregulated tobacco products to be subject to FDA's tobacco authority and the requirements in the Tobacco Control Act. Prior to the deeming rule, the only tobacco products that were subject to FDA's immediate authority were cigarettes, cigarette tobacco, smokeless tobacco, and roll-your-own tobacco. But because a tobacco product is defined very broadly to include anything made or derived from tobacco, including the components and parts and accessories, that definition expands to all sorts of products, including vapor products and their components, potentially. What the deeming rule did was expand FDA's authority to those other products, including vapor products. What we're going to focus on today are the deadlines or the upcoming submission requirements. We're also going to talk about the deadlines, those are due pursuant to FDA's compliance policy, and so we'll get into that. A couple of critical points to mention, though. What the August 8th date did immediately was freeze the market, at least that was the intention of it, to prevent any new products from entering the market without FDA authorization, either through a pre-market tobacco application or for other products like cigars, things like substantial equivalents, which unfortunately do not really apply to vapor products because of the grandfather date. We're not going to get into all those things today. We're going to try to focus on the upcoming submission deadlines, but I wanted to just make that note. And also, there are other requirements for retailers, such as ID and free sampling issues, warnings, misbranding, and modified risk claims, which you should avoid. If you have any questions about any of those requirements, please reach out to us, and we're happy to help you. Very quickly, let me quickly discuss what the deeming rule does not cover, because I often get questions about this. The deeming rule does not contain any good manufacturing, ISO, or clean room requirements for e-liquid or vapor products. Does not contain any ingredient or flavor prohibitions or maximum nicotine concentrations. There are no online sales restrictions on the federal rule, although you do need to be aware of some state issues. There are no restrictions on the devices themselves in terms of their materials or temperatures or battery standards. And there are no limits on how the products can be advertised other than the fact that you can't make any claims of reduced risk or smoking cessation, things that could cause the product to be considered a drug. But there are no real other advertising or branding limitations as of yet. However, the deeming rule is not the final say, and we do expect FDA to issue more requirements in the future, because at this point, deeming is simply a foundational rule that sets the stage for future regulation and gives FDA the authority to regulate all these other tobacco products. Okay, so before we get into the specific submission requirements and the demonstrations, first it's important to understand, do they apply to you? Are you considered a tobacco product manufacturer? And here's the definition of a manufacturer in the FDCA. It is any person, including any repacker or relabeler, who manufactures, fabricates, assembles, processes, or labels a tobacco product, or imports a finished tobacco product for sale in the U.S. Okay, it's a very broad definition that includes manufacturing itself. It's important to recognize that vape shops could very well be considered manufacturers if they create or modify products in their stores. FDA, about, I guess it was maybe 6 months ago, published a guidance document, a new guidance document that goes through the various types of activities that a vape shop may engage in that would either trigger manufacturing requirements or would be safe to do without being considered a manufacturer or simply just being a retailer. We're not going to go through those here, but here's the link to the guidance document, which will help explain whether or not your activity that you're conducting, for example, if you're mixing or bottling e-liquid or adding flavors or adding nicotine, those types of activities would cause your vape shop to become a tobacco product manufacturer and subject to all of these requirements and submission requirements that we'll talk about today. But if you're doing things like modifying a device or, pursuant to the manufacturer's specifications, then maybe not. So again, I just want to provide that brief overview, and if you have any questions about your particular vape shop, let us know. I also wanted to note that there are there is a distinction between small-scale companies and non-small-scale or large companies. If you employ fewer than 150 full-time employees and have annual revenues less than $5 million, considering your company as a whole, including any subsidiaries under your control or sister organizations, then you would be considered a small-scale company, and that provides you with some additional time to complete some of these requirements. If you are making more than $5 million a year, then you would be a large-scale company and subject to the more the deadlines that are coming up in the next few months. So there's been a recent change that I wanted to alert everyone to. Well, here are the original, or the most prior to May 1st, the deadlines that we were dealing with. Originally, manufacturing establishments had to register and submit their product list by December 31st and submit their ingredient reports by February 8th. That was, at the beginning of January, modified or extended by FDA to June 30th for registration and product listing, and August 8th for large companies to submit their health document and ingredient reports. That has recently changed because on May 1st, we received an email from the FDA's Stakeholder Relations Office that made clear that they were going to be delaying the enforcement of all future compliance deadlines set for May 10th or later, so starting tomorrow. And the purpose of this was to allow the new leadership at FDA, we are soon going to have a new commissioner, to allow them to have more time to consider issues raised by Deeming that are now the subject of multiple lawsuits. And as many of you are aware, and probably a party to, at Keller & Heckman, we represent a number of trade associations, including the Right to Be Smoke-Free Coalition, that have challenged the FDA deeming rule or aspects of it in federal court. And we are at the point now where we could receive an opinion or decision from the judge any day now. So that's one lawsuit. There have been lawsuits filed by the cigar industry that are pending, that are sort of in the process. There have been multiple lawsuits in Alabama, in West Virginia, and California that are also in the process of briefing and being considered. And so many of these lawsuits contain some of the very similar issues. And so, long story short, FDA announced in this email that they would be publishing new guidance regarding these new deadlines. So those new deadlines are, and this is what we understand to be the current status of the submission deadlines. Registration, product listing for U.S. establishments, which we'll get into, have now been moved 3 months to September 30th from June 30th. The submission of health document notification have been delayed until November 8th for large companies for small companies. Large companies technically had your health document notification due on February 8th. Because that deadline has passed, our interpretation of FDA's email that I just discussed was that that deadline did not move, meaning it wasn't moved 3 months because it wasn't after May 10th. So if you're a large company and you haven't notified FDA about your health documents, again, we're going to talk about what that means in a moment, then you should do that immediately. And if you have questions about that, please let us know. The ingredient reporting deadline has been moved to November 8th for large companies and May 8th of next year for small companies. And the PMTA, which is the pre-market tobacco application that allows you to continue marketing, has been moved to November 8th, 2018 for any products that were on the market prior to August 8th of last year, the effective date of the rule. And that's the FDA's compliance policy. There's additional reporting requirement for harmful and potentially harmful constituents, which has been moved to November 8th of 2019. So these are the current deadlines as we understand them. We are waiting for FDA to issue a new guidance document, as they said would be forthcoming, that makes this formal, but this is what we understand to be the current state of the law. Okay, so again, the second half of this presentation will involve my colleague Ben will be going through actually showing you how to step-by-step do these processes, but I'm going to provide a quick overview of the overall the law. So registration and product listing. As I just mentioned, the deadline has been extended for all companies, whether you're large or small, to September 30th of this year, except that it does not apply to foreign establishments. So Chinese manufacturers of vapor products do not register their manufacturing facilities with FDA. That only applies to domestic U.S. companies or establishments where manufacturing activity is occurring on U.S. soil. So we're going to talk about what that means, but I just want to state up front, if you're a Chinese company, while some of the other requirements do apply to you, like ingredient reporting and health document submission, registration and product listing does not yet apply to foreign establishments per the Tobacco Control Act. So what does it mean to be engaged in manufacturing activity? Well, manufacturing activity is defined as the preparation, compounding, processing, repackaging, changing the container, labeling, et cetera, of a tobacco product. That would include things like packaging or labeling e-liquid bottles, filling e-liquid bottles, mixing e-liquid, for example. Same with devices. If you're taking a device that might have been manufactured, the product itself might have been manufactured in China, but you're adding a label here or packaging it here in the United States, then that activity would likely cause the location where that's happening, a vape shop or whatever, in the U.S. to become a manufacturer subject to this registration requirement. It does not apply to importers. Okay, so unless you're engaged in one of those manufacturing activities. So if you are solely retailing a product that was manufactured in China and you are not otherwise modifying that product or engaging in a manufacturing activity, you're simply importing a product, then that would not be a product that you would need. If that's all you're doing in your facility, then you do not need to register that facility as a manufacturer or as a manufacturing establishment or include those products that you're importing on a product list. Okay, that again, it only applies to U.S. manufacturing establishments and the products that are made in the U.S. In order to complete the registration process, there's a couple of ways to do it. You could do it manually. There's a form, FDA 3741A, which applies to deemed products, that you can submit to FDA along with multiple attachments. If you search or if you Google, you can find that pretty easily. There's also a slightly more convenient online process using FDA's Unified Registration and Listing System, FURLS. And we're actually going to walk you through how to do that on FURLS during this presentation. But there's a link for that right there. Okay, for those manufacturing establishments that are domestic and do need to register, here's some of the information you need to include: your full name and address for each establishment, the name and places of business of the owner or operator. Depending on how the establishment is set up, if there's partners, you have to list the name of each partner. If it's a corporation, you have to include the name of each officer and director and the state of incorporation. In addition to registering the establishments themselves, you have to submit a list of the products that are made in that establishment. And so with that, of your finished products. And so you basically have to include the name, the type of product, and we're going to go through that in detail and show you how to do that in a moment. You also have to upload a label, and this part is what's required. You have to include a label. So if you're uploading or if you're registering an e-liquid bottle or e-liquid brand of yours, you have to include all the name, the information on the product itself, a SKU number, the type of product, and again, we'll go through that, as well as a copy of the label. So an electronic copy, like a JPEG or a PDF, will have to be uploaded. Depending on how many products that you have, how many SKUs, individual SKUs that you have, this could take some time. So if you haven't started yet, the sooner you start, the better, in case, if you're one of those companies that has potentially thousands of different SKUs, and when I say SKU, I mean a unique product that, 2 different bottle sizes, nicotine levels, et cetera, those create different products that need to be listed. And so potentially there are many companies out there who have hundreds, if not thousands, of products that require this manual uploading of labels, which could take some time. So keep that in mind. Another point to keep in mind is that if you're a contract manufacturer, if you're making e-liquid, if you're a laboratory and you're making it on behalf of your customers who are the private label brands, then your manufacturing facility is what would need to be registered with the FDA, and you would be responsible for submitting on your product list all of your customers' products that you make in your facility along with their labels. So you have to coordinate, if you're a contract manufacturer, with your private label customers to make sure that you have all the information that you need to complete the registration and product listing. And finally, this requirement, both the registration and the product listing, is a biannual, twice-a-year procedure that if you do make a change to your product list, you do have to update FDA at the end of the year, and I think every June. So that's a quick overview. Again, we're going to go through FURLS step by step after these slides. Okay, so now quickly, ingredient listing. Again, the new deadlines that have just been established by FDA is November 8th for large companies that, again, over $5 million in revenue, must report their ingredients used in their finished products, including liquids and devices. Small-scale companies that, again, that are on average making less than $5 million a year annually have about a year from now, until May 8th of next year, to submit your ingredients to FDA. Now, in terms of the data required for an ingredient, each ingredient needs to be uniquely identified, and we're going to go through how to do that. We're going to go through what's required by the law and what additional information FDA requests that you may not need to actually include, but you could include. Depending on the type of ingredient, some of that information changes. There are 2 broad categories of ingredients that you need to, that FDA defines. There are single chemical substances. So in the case of an e-liquid, for example, the single chemical substances are those discrete chemicals that are ingredients in your product. Nicotine, the glycerin, propylene glycol. These are all chemicals that have CAS numbers, chemical abstract registration numbers, that uniquely identify them. And so for those products, you would simply identify those substances. And again, we'll talk about what else is needed for that. But then there are also complex purchased ingredients, which are mixtures of chemicals. For example, flavors. A strawberry flavor or grape flavor is a complex ingredient because it is not a discrete chemical like nicotine, but a mixture of potentially dozens of chemicals in a flavor. There are 2 categories of complex purchase ingredients. There's custom complex purchase ingredients and commodity complex purchase ingredients. the commodity ingredients are the ones that are off the shelf. So if you have a supplier, a flavor house that supplies flavors for your e-liquids, but you don't know what's in them other than what they provide, on the MSDS. But if you're just buying it off the shelf, you're not customizing it in any way or asking them to customize it in any way, then that would be a commodity complex ingredient or off-the-shelf ingredient versus a custom ingredient or custom CPI where you are involved in the determining the specifications of the ingredient. If you have chemists that you work with that are helping to design the flavor and customize it for your company alone, then that would be a custom CPI. For the single chemical substances, again, like nicotine or propylene glycol, you have to identify the chemical itself and its unique scientific name or a code like a CAS number. FDA also requests additional information such as quality, which could be something like the percentage purity. Sometimes the MSDSs will identify the level of purity or the level of impurity of a product. That might be something you could fulfill. It also requests identification number like the SKU number. Now that's required, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's actually an internal kind of SKU, not the...
Right. So this slide, maybe the internal identification number should be on the required. It should be clear that that's the required information as we'll go through. For complex purchased ingredient, so again, the easy example that we'll go through is a flavor that you are adding to your e-liquid. If you're not making it yourself, if you're just purchasing it from a flavor house, all you have to do is identify who the manufacturer is, who your supplier is, their unique identifying information such as UPC code, and we'll get into customized ingredients. But that's it. I want to be clear that for complex ingredients, which are mixtures, you don't have to provide the breakdown of the flavor. You don't provide the CAS numbers or the formulation of the flavor because typically you don't have that information because that's confidential to your supplier. So you simply would identify the manufacturer, the name of the product, the internal identification number, and the quantity of it. FDA does, again, as we say here, request some additional information which you can include. In terms of reporting the ingredient quantity, that's typically a unit of mass, such as grams. For e-liquids, are the companies reporting grams or milliliters per milligram?
It's always in grams, but it could be milligrams per gram, et cetera. They do ask that you remain consistent between your different ingredients, but you do have the option, I think, all the way down to picograms or some very, very small amount.
Right. And you do have the option of identifying whether it's a portion product like a single cigarette or a single cigar or, I would assume, a single bottle of e-liquid. Or if it's a non-portion product, then it would be per gram of product in the container. For example, of snuff or tobacco or even, I guess, e-liquids.
Yeah.
So that's the basic requirements for the ingredient report. Again, we're going to walk you through how to do that using FDA's eSubmitter, and we'll have some hypotheticals to go through. The other requirement is the health document submission. I'm going to jump a slide here and first define what a health document is. A health document is any document related to the health, toxicological, behavioral, or physiologic impact. Sorry, that keeps. This is the walkthrough we're going to go through, but oh boy, this one. Sorry. So a health document is broadly defined as really anything related to the health and safety of a product, any testing that you might have done, test reports, but it doesn't include non-product specific studies, for example, in the literature. What FDA is trying to do is get a hold of so that they don't have to do any, searching themselves or reduce their burden. Get a hold of anything in your possession related to the health and safety of your product that you might have developed. Now, the good news is, from a burden standpoint on the industry, the good news is that right now, per FDA's guidance document, they are only requesting health documents that were developed between June 23rd, 2009 and December 31st, 2009, so the second half of 2009. So if you weren't in business back in 2009, or if you didn't develop documents on your products back in 2009, then you have no health documents to submit. But you still must notify FDA that you don't have anything to submit, and we're going to walk you through how to do that. So again, the deadline for large companies that are making over $5 million a year was February 8th. That deadline does not appear to have been extended. So if you have not made that submission to FDA or notification that you don't have any documents to submit to FDA, you need to do so immediately, and we're happy to help you through that. For small-scale companies that make less than $5 million a year, the deadline was pushed back to November 8th. But again, I'm assuming that the vast majority of people on this call, small companies included that are coming up, were not in business in 2009 or did not have health documents in 2009, and therefore do not have anything to actually submit to FDA at this time except for the notification itself. All right? Okay. So that was the overview of the registration, product listing, ingredient reporting, and the health document submission. I am now going to transition over to my colleague, Ben Wolf, who is going to show you how to actually do that and actually apply some of what I just discussed to your businesses. So first, we're going to talk about some pretend facts for the hypotheticals that we can walk through these processes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Azim. We're going to address questions at the end, but I did see one question pop up that I wanted to mention briefly. Someone asked if these materials were going to be available later for people to review, and that's, yes, they are, including a recording of this presentation. Yes, so this will all be available for replay later, and I believe the slides will be made available. So if anyone's furiously jotting down notes but would rather not and just look at this again, that's available or will be. All right, so in our hypothetical situation, there's two companies to think about, again, all hypotheticals. KH Vapor Corporation, which is incorporated in Washington, D.C., with Azim as the CEO. They only manufacture a few things: one open system e-cigarette, two e-liquid flavors, grape and fruit punch. The fruit punch is sold in 30 ml glass bottles with either 0 milligrams of nicotine or 1.5 milligrams of nicotine, and they sell it both under their own name but also for Heckman Incorporated under the name Fruity Heckman. There's also a grape e-liquid that has 0 milligrams of nicotine with in 30 and 60 milliliter bottles, and they're also an importer of one e-liquid from a company in China called China Vapor Corp. Obviously, the example that we're going to go through could be expanded. It doesn't have to be, such a small product list. It could be, 100 or 1,000 or more, but we'll be able to demonstrate adequately with this list. And you'll actually see throughout my examples, there's going to be some corners that I cut just to save time for the presentation, and you'll have to sort of extend the knowledge to all of your ingredients. So you can provide the health documents as a submission either for the domestic or foreign. So KH Vapor Co. can submit as a manufacturer or as an importer. And in fact, they could submit twice, but not both in the same document. So in theory, they would have to do two health document submissions, and I'll demo that in a moment. Regarding the registration and listing, and it's important to note that there's two kinds of listing that we're going to discuss now. With the registration in FURLS, you have to list your products, and that's by SKU. So I make this 30 ml bottle of e-liquid. There's also ingredient listing, which is for that particular bottle of e-liquid, all of the specific ingredients, again, with the exception of the complex purchase ingredients, in which case you could sort of lump all of the subcomponents of the flavor into one ingredient, but we'll go through that. So the product list, just to give some more information as well as SKU numbers, looks like this. You don't need to know that, but it might just help follow along. And actually now I'm going to switch over and show you the registration and health documents. So for the registration, this is the FURLS system. You're going to have to set up a login, which we've already done. You put in your account ID and password. I understand. Login. Let's try again. And you can see that it's thinking. It could be quite slow, and this is exactly to Azim's point from before, that you don't want to put off your registration because you could imagine uploading a bunch of files if it's that slow just to log in. So when we set up our account, we provided a bunch of account information, including that we were interested in doing tobacco products, so this is checked. And to do a registration, you click on here, and it brings you to a page that gives you some information, but also lets you do a new registration product listing. For the purposes of our example, we're going to say that we're registering as the owner who is also the operator of all the establishments, and we're just going to have a single establishment located at our main address. Now you have a lot of information that it wants to know, the owner name, et cetera. That all actually was created with the account, so you could just click the autofill from account information, but of course you could also hand enter if you needed to. So the owner name is Keller and Heckman, so forth and so on. It's got me listed. My contact information is here, my phone number, et cetera. You will, of course, want to check to make sure all of those are good. And then click to go to the business structure. And we're going to say that this is a corporation. And I'm going to put Azim as the CEO. Sorry. And we don't need to add another corporate officer. And we're going to say we're in the District of Columbia. And then if we are doing business as another name, we could put that here. And then, in fact, that would be, and then we go on to the next. We could, of course, do additional business names or additional corporate officers, but you get the point for those. Now, it's going to hang up for a second while it actually checks the information, and you'll see that it wants to correct it from 1001 G Street, Suite 500 to the same information but formatted a little bit differently. Of course, you check all of that and accept the validated address. Because the owner and operator are the same, it's already pre-filled all of the operator information. If they were different, this would be the time to put that information in. And again, the business structure, but of course, because they're the same, that's already grayed out. So now it wants to know about the establishment information, but since our establishment is the same as our place of business, we could autofill. If you had a corporate headquarters or if you had multiple establishments, some of which weren't at the corporate headquarters, you would have to enter information again here. So at this point, they want to know what you're doing there. This is optional. You can skip it, and we will. And again, it's going to check the...
And that brings up a good point. You'll see in the system quite a bit of information is optional. And that means it's your choice to include it in your registration. So you can choose not to include or check some of these boxes if it is not pertinent really to do so.
All right. So this is the point where you're adding your product information. And so you can manually enter it all, but you can also go to this link here, the product listing template that's bolded. And if you click on that, it will download a template for you to upload or to fill out and upload. And for the purposes of this example, I've already done one of them, and it's just a single product, but obviously all finished products would need to go into the listing. So I'm going to select the file, which I've saved into a folder here, and upload it.
You want to show them what that folder looks like?
And for demo, for informational purposes, I'll pull it up and show you what is in that file. It's pretty basic information, and in fact, so it's got the product name, category, the identification number, there we are. The SKU, you identify that it's a SKU number, it's for consumer use. Your other option there is for further manufacturing.
But again, although FDA's spreadsheet allows you to include products that are intended for further manufacturing, legally, products intended for further manufacturing, for example, if you are making e-liquid that was being supplied to e-cigarette companies to be pre-filled into a device, into a cigalike, then your e-liquid, which is for further manufacturing, is not a finished product that technically would not need to be listed, because this only applies to finished products. Nevertheless, it appears to be a remnant of FDA's Excel spreadsheet that doesn't really make sense. But if you're listing products, it should be those products that are finished products that are intended for consumer use.
Yeah. So the product category and subcategory, and those are both pull downs. So within the end systems, you sort of have e-cigarette kits, e-hookah kit, e-cigarette, so forth and so on. And you do often have the option to say other and then specify. They ask if it's an open or closed system, whether there's a flavor, and if so, specify, and then advertising, labeling, and consumer information. You will probably have labeling, although I've put no here, and you may have advertising or consumer information, although you can get around submitting those if you don't care to, though FDA may come asking. And then if you're updating your product listing on a submitted registration, you would also mention when the date the product was introduced. But since this is an initial registration, we don't have that.
Yeah. But generally, most of you will have labels that you will have to update.
So you could also associate existing product lists here, which we don't have, and then you could add additional new products. But to go into here just to do a quick edit to show you what it looks like as you're going through manually, you could edit here the labeling, for instance, and it asks you for the UPC, the type of labeling, and then when it was disseminated within the range, and then it's going to ask you to upload a file. So now we have our product list of 1, and we're going to move on to the next step, and now basically we go through the steps to, again, it's asking you to add other establishments, to give you another chance to do that. And now at this point, you basically confirm your information, scroll through to the bottom, and then you continue to submit. You agree that you're not going to put a willfully false statement. You identify who it is that's signing. It will autofill that information at that point, and then you click submit, which I'm not going to do, but that would be it. That gets you to where you need to go. So that's how to do your registration and product listing. when you don't have labels to upload or anything else to upload, and it's a small list of ingredients, products, it's pretty quick. But again, this software can be very finicky, and it takes a long time to upload files. So if you have a lot of SKUs and labeling, you're going to want to start very early. Moving on to eSubmitter, which is what's used to compile the information for health document submission, and basically every other submission that goes into FDA in the next little while. You want to come into the on FDA's website and do for industry FDA submitter. There's a link here for download and installation, and then you would download the eSubmitter software and install it. We've already done that. It'll give you an icon like this, although I should warn folks that the icon gets buried pretty well into your system, so you're going to want to put an icon or a shortcut on your desktop or somewhere where you can find it easily. So as it loads.
And again, just to clarify for everyone, eSubmitter is separate from FURLS. FURLS, which we just showed you the examples on, is on FDA's website. That's for registration and product listing. Ingredient listing is not FURLS. It's through a completely separate program where you can submit the ingredients to FDA, for example, through the CTP Portal, which we'll show you. But you have to download eSubmitter to package the information. And it takes you can get eSubmitter very, very quickly as you can download. It's a not very large file, but to get a CTP Portal account, it takes some time. You've got to go back and forth with FDA for that. It's not difficult to do, but you need to give yourself a few weeks for that. Anyway, this is what it looks like when it comes up. This button here is for eSubmitter registration. That's like a software registration. It has nothing to do with you registering your facility or anything else, and so I'm going to skip to register later. So when you first open it up, you're going to want to create a new submission, but I've got a few that are already created, so I'll go to Open Existing Submission to demo the first thing. So I've created one for health document submission for KH Vapor Co. that I'll walk through briefly. This will be the first window that you come to, and it's basically background information, and so you can tab to the next page. And in fact, this is additional information. The first thing it's going to ask you that you have to do something is, are you filing as an importer or as a tobacco product manufacturer? In this case, as a tobacco product manufacturer. Then it's going to ask if you have anything to submit or nothing to submit. Click the nothing to submit, and then sort of a confirmation here. This additional box here is not necessary, but it's basically if you don't anticipate having anything to submit, you can check that box. We recommend not checking it for the time being, but that is an option available. And again, just to reemphasize, unless you are doing business in 2009 and were conducting or performing testing on your product or developing other health documents in 2009, then you would not have anything to submit at this point, because FDA is only requesting health documents developed between June and December 2009 right now for your products. So most companies are going to check this box that say they do not have any such products to submit. And I would just add to that that if you've acquired another company, that you would still be responsible for their health document submissions. And also FDA has indicated they're going to at some point ask for health documents generated after that time frame. So just because you have something that's not from that time frame doesn't mean you should get rid of it. It just means you don't have to submit it yet. Right. So moving on to the next one, again, just a confirmatory page. Now it's going to ask for information. So to help you in the long run, you can go to Tools and Address Book, and you can create information about a company and actually a contact list. So I've already done that for Zeem. I'll demonstrate for China Vapor Co., for which I'll be the CEO. So you create new, and you say China Vapor Co.
You can do a division name, et cetera. And it actually is worth pointing out that this blue dot here, those are required responses. Everything else is optional. So I've put the name out. You don't have to give a division or a URL. You can also include a phone number, which is maybe optional, but I would recommend doing it because if there's an issue, you want FDA to be able to get in touch with you. So despite the fact that this is supposed to be a Chinese company, I'm going to give my U.S. information and the phone type, which is a relatively recent thing. So you don't have to give a fax number. Reference numbers would be your FEI number if you've already registered your facility.
In this case, a Chinese company
would not
just
have,
to reemphasize, would not register, but would still have to submit health documents and the ingredients.
Yes. You can, the DUNS number you can request, but none of these so far are necessary. The physical location, you would give the information again. If this is a Chinese company, you would click Other and select China from the list, but for ease, I'm just going to give
our address here.
Give our address here, and you need to give. They require for some reason the zip code. You can't get away without the zip code. It'll show up as an error, and so I'll put that. And then for the mailing location, you can actually just copy the address over. And it brings everything from the previous page over, and then you can insert comments, but again, not necessary. And when you then create an associated person, and you can insert a phone number which I will do very quickly. So, there we go. So now I've created the contact for myself as the president of KH Vapor Co. So I've got Azim's information here. To bring this in, you click this red arrowed button, and that'll let you select. And it'll overwrite, but since it's the same information, you choose the physical location, and then you can scroll down. All the blue dots are filled in, so we're good to go. This is the place here where you would attach a cover letter or additional submission documents if you had things to submit. It's a normal upload just by clicking the plus sign there. We don't have any of those for this. And then confirmation. We're almost at the point of being done. This is, you have to check this box here saying that you're not sending willfully false statements, and then you identify who it is that is sending the, presenting the information. Now you're done with the package, with the files, so you can go to Output and do a missing data report, and that'll tell you if you're missing any information. And you'll see here there's nothing missing, so that's good. And then you go to Output a submission report, because what will actually be generated at the end is going to be just an XML file that you won't be able to open. So this is like a printed submission that you can keep for your own files. It has all the information. Before submitting, you should check everything here to make sure that it's accurate and save it for your records.
Could you pull that up again, the PDF?
Yes.
I want to just walk through it real quick.
Absolutely.
So this PDF shows that for the health document submission, it's being performed by a tobacco product manufacturer. We've indicated that we have no health documents to submit at this time. We have left unchecked the box that anticipates potential future documents. Again, the reason being that right now FDA is requesting documents in your possession from 2009. In the future, it could request documents for later years. So we recommend leaving that unchecked and keeping track of any documents, health documents you produce at all, because at some point FDA will request those. And then scroll down, you'll see the rest of the contact information. And we also, in this case, we didn't submit a cover letter, but for the health document notifications that we've done for our clients, we will submit a cover letter that explains what we're doing here and why we're not submitting any documents. So it's not required, but it's probably a good practice to include some sort of a cover letter along with your submission, which you can attach through the eSubmitter.
And the
or the portal.
No, through eSubmitter,
okay.
yes. And so this says no file attached. If there had been a file attached, it would just say the name of the file. It would not include the cover letter, so you'll need to keep a copy of that as well. And then, just the confirmation here and who is submitting. So once you're happy with all of that, then you can go again to Output and package the submission. It asks you for a file name and an output location. Those are both fine. And then here it has the file attachment list, which is empty because we didn't attach anything, but otherwise it would say cover letter for KH Vapor Co. health document submission. And now the packaging of the submission file. So you're going to send it electronically to CTP. Otherwise, you could do this and it would allow you to burn. I believe we've not actually tried that. You can review the submission report, but that's exactly the same thing that we just went through, that PDF. This is another place to access it. The digital signature, you're going to have to create a digital signature and then link to that, and then you you use your password and then you package, and it's successful, and I've now got a zip file that I can upload through the CTP portal. When you click next, it'll actually give you a link to the CTP portal here, although you can get to it, however you care to. And that's it. We're done. Except for submitting it to FDA, we're done with the health document submission.
So again, let me just quickly clarify, because I know we're going through this very quickly. eSubmitter is a program that you download onto your computer that allows you to package the information into a file, which we will then submit using CTP Portal, which we haven't showed you yet. This process is separate from FURLS, which is the registration and product listing website that you use for the U.S. companies that are registering their establishments and submitting product lists. That's a separate website called FURLS, F-U-R-L-S. eSubmitter is a program that you download for the health document and ingredient listing, which you then submit through CTP Portal. So now Ben's going to show you how to use CTP Portal.
Well, first the ingredient listing and then CTP Portal.
Okay, so we're going to hold off on submitting on the CTP Portal itself. We're going to first show you how to use eSubmitter, since we're already in it, to prepare your ingredient lists. So
going back briefly to the product list, so here's a tabulated form, but so for the vapor device, we can all products have components, and all components have ingredients. There's at least one component per product and at least one ingredient per component. So you can imagine a vapor device might have a coil, a mouthpiece, an atomizer, a tank, a battery. We're going to discuss the listing for the coil itself, and then obviously you would need to put the components and ingredients for all of the other things as well, but we're going to have a single component device. So the components, the ingredients within the component would be a stainless steel coil, which a silicone seal, the housing, and the cap, all of which would be commodity CPIs.
So let me quickly just jump in and clarify something real quick. FDA has not provided any guidance for specifically how to submit these ingredients of a device, of the hardware used in a vapor device or an e-cigarette. They do have their general guidance, which is on their website, but it's more easily translatable for tobacco products with tobacco leaves and actual tobacco and also e-liquids. But when it comes to devices, we're generally taking our interpretation of how to best apply that for device and hardware is that the various components of a product, so maybe go back to the slide on the components, the various components are themselves containing the various ingredients. So again, just to reemphasize this again, I know we went through it, but the coil, mouthpiece, atomizer are components that using eSubmitter, you have to, every tobacco product has to have a component or more than at least one component. And then we are breaking that down into sort of subcomponents, which we are calling ingredients. And so that's our interpretation of it, although with the lack of FDA guidance on this issue, there could be other interpretations, but this is how we have decided the best way to do this is. I know that comments have been submitted to FDA arguing that they should not require ingredient submission for devices because it doesn't really make a lot of sense with what they provided. And we'll see if FDA updates their guidance or provides more information. But for now, based on its current guidance, this is our interpretation of how to best complete this process for devices.
So this table here, which just has the general information, it's, you're going to need to know the manufacturer and provide the manufacturer of your complex purchase ingredient, their SKU or other identifying number, but you also have to have an ingredient number, which is sort of your internal SKU. So if I buy a stainless steel coil from Coil Co., I'm going to order CC1234 from them. That's their part number. But when it comes into my shipping and receiving, I'm going to assign it the number KH0100. If that's not the way that your business operates, to do ingredient listing, you're still going to have to assign an ingredient number for the purposes of this exercise. FDA requires it.
And you could just use the manufacturer's own SKU, right, as your own ingredient number.
Any number
if it's easier that way, if you're not creating your own list with your own numbers, you could just use it twice.
And another thing to note is that you could potentially buy from multiple manufacturers. In this case, we've had a single manufacturer for each, but there's a place where you could enter multiple manufacturers for if you've got multiple vendors. So going to eSubmitter to demonstrate that, I'm going to go to File and open one of the other files, and that's the ingredient listing. And so you tab forward, and here we've selected that it's the initial submission of ingredients. We're doing it as a manufacturer. You could also do it as an importer if you want to for the things that you're importing. Again, we've brought in the information using this button here to say that the manufacturer is Cage Vapor Co. For this one, you do have to scroll down to say that the authorized representative is the same, or if it's different, you can enter the information for the company. Advancing forward, here you can bring in the product list. So if you go to the Info tab here, there's a link to download the template. We've downloaded the template, and I'm going to import it or show how to import it. You select the source file here again, and then check that the first row is a header, and add to the existing data or replace. I've already got the information for some of the products in there, so I'm not going to actually import it, but it would just populate it the same as when you bring in contact information. So you'll see from the list that there are only 4 of the products here. There's the e-cigarette, there's the fruit punch with no nicotine in 30 ml bottle, fruit punch with 1.5 milligrams of nicotine in 30 ml bottle, and the grape with a 30 ml bottle. The reason that we don't have the other products there is that as a last step, you can link products that are identical, and that's on a per-use basis. So if you have different packaging configuration, like, for instance, a change in the bottle size, then you could link that at the end. So that's why we only have the 30 ml bottle for the grape, because we've linked the 60 ml bottle at the end. The two fruity Heckmans are the same except for the brand name, so we've linked those. And China Vapor Corp's product would be listed as an importer, and you have to do that as a separate submission, so that's why that one is not here. So if you highlight onto one of them, and we'll start with the e-cigarette since that's just what we've discussed, and tab forward, and this just tells you that you may that you're moving on from this page, but since you can go back, there's nothing to worry about it, so I'm going to tell it to ignore the future navigation messages. So when you come here, this is where you add the component. You'll note that there isn't a place to import information. So for components, you have to hand enter everything. So you click the plus button, and it asks you the component type, e-liquid, atomizer, coil head. That's what we're doing here, but also mouthpiece, tank cartridge, wick, or other. So I'll click on this, and then say that it's the coil assembly and the manufacturer information, which would be KH Vapor Co., since we're assembling it, and it's KH Coil. So then once you have a component, you can advance forward, and this would be where you would enter all of the components. And now here you're to the ingredient listing. Again, you can import that, and in this case I will do that. So that's here, and that's the ingredient list. First row is a header, and it'll give you the information from the first row only to preview to make sure everything's okay. So you can look through here and see what everything looks like, and then start the data import. So now we have the information in the same format as we'd see it in the spreadsheet. So it's the item number, the ingredient name, which you've all seen, the ingredient number and ingredient type, all of which were on the chart. The unique scientific name or code is for a chemical ingredient. Ditto for the type of name. So those pieces of information are not required. And in fact, this is easier to see if you click on the detail view. So this will give you the detail for a single of the ingredients, and you can scroll back and forth between the ingredients using these blue arrows. So for the silicone seal, for instance, you've got to enter the ingredient name, ingredient number, that's your internal SKU, and what type of ingredient it is, complex ingredient in this case. All of these are grayed out because these are for single chemical substances.
So let me just, if we scroll back up, for the device end, again, our interpretation is that all the components and subcomponents, or what we're calling ingredients, are complex, meaning not single chemical substances. So you don't have to get into the chemical makeup of the components or the subcomponents like you would for an e-liquid. But because they're complex purchased ingredients, you only have to identify, as we get into it here, the supplier information and the manufacturer information, but not the actual chemical composition like you would for an e-liquid.
So scrolling down to the next blue dot, it asks for the manufacturer name and number. So here we have that information that was on the presentation, and whether it's made to your specification. Here we've checked no. If we checked yes, which I'll show in a moment, you'd have to enter the ingredients that go into it. So scrolling down a little bit more, it wants the ingredient details. So here you have the option, but not required, to talk about the quality, and the expected functions. We haven't included that for the reasons that Azim laid out before. Then the quantity, which are required. So you can choose gram, milligram, microgram, nanogram, or picogram. They'd like you to be consistent, although it doesn't kick it out if you use grams for some and picograms for others. Then you can choose per gram of product or unit of use. In this case, it doesn't make sense to talk about a unit of use, a gram of product, but rather a unit of use. So that's what we do for things that are likely to be reused, like the device stuff or the bottles for the e-liquids. It's based, in this case, on an amount calculated, though you have several other options: amount tested, amount to achieve an outcome, or residual amount. For amount calculated, you just need one number. It can't have a comma, and it has to have a decimal place. Otherwise, it won't accept that information as being valid. All of these other pieces of information would change what's required depending on what you choose for the type of quantity, and that's it. That's the entirety for the ingredient. After you've done the ingredients, the next screen is to list in identical products, which I'll show you how to do it, but then we don't have an identical product here. Here you need to give basically the same information as the product in the first place. So the brand or sub-brand, if you have a signed tobacco product tracking number, is it under review, and then some type of identification. Even though this isn't dotted blue, you do need to give a SKU number or something, or catalog number, and choose which of those it is. So I'm going to delete that because of that there isn't actually a linked thing. And now I'm going to tab back to go to the next product. So the fruit punch flavor, and I'm going to, for the sake of time because we're running out, I'm going to look at the nicotine-based one. And the basic information is the same for the product. Here we have two components. We've got the glass bottle and the e-liquid. Looking at the e-liquid briefly, you've got 4 ingredients. The propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and nicotine are all single chemical substances. So you have this earlier information identified rather than the later information, but it would be the unique scientific name, the registry code, what type of registry that is, and whether it's a reaction product. So if you put 2 chemicals inside the product and expect them to react to create a third chemical, you would also need to list that chemical. And then here we have the information for the flavor. And again, this is an off-the-shelf flavor from a company called Flavor House. It's not custom made. And then, again, all of that same unit of measure for quantity and the quantity amount, exactly the same as before. Again, these are sort of made-up numbers, so if they don't match or even come close to matching your specifications, that's because I was just putting numbers onto the page for the sake of an example, and that's the extent of it.
So these are all, it might be kind of hard to see, but maybe you can read off some of those that are not required?
Yes, of course. So, well, these after could be required if you use a different value, but basically the quality of measure, so how pure it is, et cetera, would not be required, though you can include that. Looking at the quantities, you could do amount tested, which would either be a mean quantity and variability. You could also look at, if you're to achieve an outcome, the single value or the range of values, target outcome type, et cetera. So there's a few different options for there, and I'm actually going to go through some of them briefly as part of a different example. When you're up here, you can actually just click on the component and to look at the other one. So this is for the bottle. This is if you have a single bottle size. You can look at the ingredients, and
that brings up a good point when we're talking about bottle size and how that creates different SKUs. So when we were, if you recall, when we first went through registration and the product list through FURLS, every bottle size is a different SKU that must be listed in the spreadsheet that you upload into FURLS, and along with the label for each product. When it comes to submitting the ingredients for an e-liquid, you don't have to separately list, or you don't have to repeat yourself and list the ingredients for liquids that come in different bottle sizes. You can link different ingredients together. Maybe you're going to get into that.
Yeah. So I'm jumping ahead to that here. So for the component for the grape flavor, where it could be 30 or 60 milliliter glass bottle, for the component name, I've listed it as 30 and 60 milliliter glass bottle. And even though it's the same company, I've listed two different manufacturers, one for each bottle with different SKU number. When you look at the ingredient there, for the amount, the quantity, instead of doing the amount calculated with an amount to achieve outcome, and our outcome here is that we want to hold 100% of the volume. And then we do the range, and we say it's 5,000 to 7,500 milligrams. So for this purpose, we're saying that that's the range for the bottles. And then when you go to the linking, here we've just linked the 60 milliliter grape flavor. So that's the way that you would list a multi-size bottle. Another thing to note, and then I'm going to just show a couple slides actually about the CTP portal, is that when you are looking at the e-liquid, in this case we do have a custom e-liquid. The super grape flavor would be made up of multiple single chemical substances, but I've listed this one in particular. So when you go to the flavor and look at the details, this is where it would you would have linked that check that it's custom, and then you link here to the flavor. But what you could do is actually just link to the flavor itself. The super grape flavor is made up of super grape flavor. FDA may come back with questions about that. But this is a way to get the information submitted without necessarily upfront entering the entire list of ingredients for a custom product. So after you've completed entering all of your products, components, and ingredients, as well as linked products, you would go through the same process again of looking at the missing data report, then generating a submission report and saving that for your files, and then packaging the submission and going to the CTP portal to upload. So the reason I'm showing slides for this is because CTP portal remembers and shares, whoever logs in, information about the recent submissions. So for the sake of our clients' privacy, once you log into CTP portal, this is the main screen you'll get. You're going to go to this launch upload tool up here. Here you can see recent information or recent uploads, messages, etc. When you click on the launch uploader tool, you click on the upload eSubmitter file.
So again, I'm just going to take this moment to reemphasize the eSubmitter program is what you download to prepare the filing of for your health document submission and your ingredient lists. Once you've prepared those files in eSubmitter, then you can upload them and submit to FDA using CTP Portal. Again, that's just for health document submission and ingredient reporting. Registration and product listing is through a separate system called FURLS.
So after you click this upload, it'll let you give a file name, a description. I'm sorry, you have to browse to the file description. You check this box saying that the information that you're authorized to upload, and then you click the upload button and you're done. This upload history will update to include that. You will not get an email confirmation, at least not immediately, and so you should take a screenshot to confirm and prove anything that you may need to prove later to FDA that, yes, you did submit it. And then that's it. You're submitted. And we have a few minutes left for questions. But, again, if you have any questions for myself or Azim.
Open up the list that you submitted, and hopefully this is not chaotic. All right, so we're just going to go through some of these questions that we received through the chat. All right.
I'll highlight, you can answer.
Okay. One question is, I cannot get into the CTP portal. Is there another way to submit the information? So whether it's health documents or the ingredient listing, you don't have to do it through one of these online tools. You could do it manually through the paper forms. So there's for example, for the ingredient listing, the form is 3741A. I don't know what the number is for health document. It's a very simple form. I think it's 3743 actually for health document submission. You can find all the forms on FDA's website under Center for Tobacco Products, and do it manually through filling out the form and mailing it to the Document Control Center. So that's your other option. Okay, next question is, do CBD e-liquids that have no nicotine need to be registered? No. If you are dealing with products like CBD, well, I should qualify that. Probably not, because that's what lawyers do. But the reason is because CBD products that do not contain nicotine, like a CBD e-liquid, would technically not fall under FDA's definition of a tobacco product that is subject to deeming and the Tobacco Control Act requirements. Now, a zero nicotine e-liquid what FDA's position is that zero nicotine e-liquids are components and parts because it is a reasonable thing, or it could be intended for nicotine to be added later by a vape shop, for example, or a consumer. So zero nicotine e-liquids, I would argue, would have to be subject to registration and product listing and ingredient reporting, as Ben went through. And if it's a CBD liquid, my understanding is you're generally not adding nicotine, or it's really not intended or expected for nicotine to be added to a CBD e-liquid or a TFN, or tobacco-free nicotine e-liquid, that already contains nicotine but not derived from tobacco. Usually those products, you have a better chance of arguing with FDA that nicotine is not, nicotine derived from tobacco is not intended or expected to be added to them, and therefore would not be tobacco products subject to deeming. So I do suggest that you reach out to an attorney and get maybe an opinion letter about that, whether those requirements apply to your products. But that's the general position that FDA is taking with e-liquids and zero nicotine e-liquids. A question regarding health document submission. If a company has not generated any health documents and doesn't keep a repository of studies or documents generally related to vaping by outside individuals, do they have to locate suitable documents to send, or is there a way to notify FDA that you do not have any health documents? So, again, there's no requirement to have health documents. FDA just wants to know if you have any in your possession that fall into the category of what they're looking for. Then you have to submit those documents. So if you don't have any documents, no, you don't have to go out and create documents or develop documents for the purpose of submitting them. You would just tell FDA that you don't have them by simply checking that box in eSubmitter or on the form.
And in fact, if it's a publicly available document, if someone's published a study in a journal, then you wouldn't have to submit that either.
Okay. Next question. If our retail stores sell e-liquid that is another company's product, so I'm assuming they're being manufactured by another company, which they relabel for us, does this make our company a manufacturer if we only sell a finished product? Okay, so it sounds like you have an e-liquid, like a vape shop, that is having the manufacturer put the vape shop's label on the product before it it gets shipped to the vape shop, which then sells it? The answer is no. Even though it's your label and maybe you're the brand owner of that label, the manufacturer that's bottling and labeling the product is the company that would be the manufacturer that has the establishment that would need to register. You as a vape shop that is only selling the finished product and not labeling it yourself, that would not be a manufacturing activity.
However, if the product is improperly listed or not listed, then, or the ingredients aren't properly listed, then it could be, FDA could take action against the product, which means that even though you're not the one that needed to do ingredient listing or registration or any of that, you could lose your products because your manufacturer can't give them to you.
This is that contract manufacturing scenario we went through. You would need to make sure that whoever's making your product or labeling them is in fact registering their establishment with FDA and listing the products, and that you're working with them to make sure that the ingredients are reported to FDA. Okay, next question. If we manufacture e-liquid in our lab and sell our own e-liquid as well as hardware from overseas in our brick-and-mortar locations, are we required to register our products that we import from overseas but do not manufacture, or are we only required to register products that we do manufacture? So it's a very good question. You would only register, so you would register your lab because that is the establishment that is making e-liquid, and you would list in the product listing the e-liquids that you are making in that lab, but you would not list the products that you are importing from China, the devices, because those are being made in China. So for the product listing purposes, you do not list those products, or I guess you could call it registering those products. You only register the products that you are making in your lab. Now, keep in mind, though, you should make sure when it comes to the ingredient reporting that the products that you're importing from China, that those manufacturers are reporting the ingredients in those products to FDA, because although it's not subject to registration or product listing for your brick and mortar, the ingredients do need to be submitted by the manufacturer themselves by November 30th if they're a large company.
Or by an importer. So you can do that on behalf.
That's true. That's true. So when it comes to ingredient listing, the brick and mortar vape shop, if you're listed as one of the importers, you could take that on, but most likely if you're a vape shop, you're probably one of many importers, or there could be a central importer that the Chinese company has established in the U.S. One of those companies needs to submit the ingredients to FDA. As long as that's done by someone, then you don't have to. FDA doesn't want redundant information. So again, you just have to coordinate with the importer or the manufacturer to make sure that the ingredients for devices coming from overseas or e-liquids are in fact reported to FDA. Okay, next question. So does it count as a custom extract, or I guess what you're saying is a custom purchased ingredient, if we contract out a flavor to be made, but we do not specify what ingredients go in? For example, we want a strawberry cream and we ask them to make it creamier. That's a good question. I guess you could, it depends on the scenario. If it's as simple as that, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think that you're okay calling it a
commodity
ingredient if you're just saying, here's sort of what we're looking for. It would be more if you're saying, we want you to put this particular chemical in this amount.
Right.
It's a little bit murkier if you're telling them start with this flavor and modify it with these particular ingredients. But in the circumstance where you're just saying, we want a creamier flavor, or we want it, a little bit sweeter or less sweet, but you're not telling them how to get there, that's not custom.
Right. We get some questions about warnings. I'm going to pass on that for this presentation, but please do feel free to contact us separately to answer any of those questions. We're almost out of time here. I'll take one more question if we can find one that makes sense to answer. Prop 65 questions, again, we're going to please contact us separately. We can discuss that. Are you required to create a digital signature within the eSubmitter software? If so, can you be able to show us how it's done?
So the digital signature is actually done through Adobe, and it's not something that takes a very long time, but it's a little bit more involved than we have time for now.
So yeah, if you have questions, we can contact us separately, and we can maybe walk you through that. For e-liquids, would bottles and labels be listed as ingredients? That's a good question.
Anything that might impact the e-liquid itself would be an ingredient. So if you have the bottle obviously holds the ingredient, otherwise, or the product, so the bottle counts. The cap that keeps the ingredient in place, tamper-evident seals would definitely, if you have something that blocks the light, even if the goal is not specifically to block light, which might impact the functionality, but that it does do that, like a box that you put the bottle inside, and also that might protect the bottle from breakage. Yes, the specific label, depending on what level of functionality that adds besides letting people know what's inside, could be, but it depends on the specific situation.
So an e-liquid packaged in a bottle would basically be broken down into several components. It would be the bottle itself, like a glass bottle. It would be the cap and dripper, which might be a combination of ingredients. The e-liquid itself, the actual e-liquid, and the label. And it may be if there's any shrink wrap around the label.
Anything that protects the e-liquid from damage or premature aging, like a light blocking box or something like that.
Right, like outer packaging would be sort of one component. And then we would break those down into ingredients. Usually, again, they would all be mostly complex ingredients. So the glass would be the ingredient that you would list as a complex ingredients for the bottle. Same with the cap and dripper would be, you would list those as complex ingredients, so you only identify your supplier of the cap and bottle, or the bottle supplier, for example, of the glass bottle. The e-liquid we went through, the label itself would, I guess, be the company where the label's printed, would be the last step in the manufacturing process of the label.
And again, that would only be if the label is doing something to the e-liquid. So if it's being shipped inside an outer box, then the label don't actually impact the e-liquid. We would have to have a...
Yeah, so that's something that we would go through, on a case-by-case basis to determine whether or not that label would be an ingredient. Another question. What should large and small-scale manufacturers be doing to prepare for when FDA asks us to have health documents? Again, it's not a requirement that you have health documents, but to the extent that you are developing health documents, like you're testing your e-liquid, perhaps you might be right now in the middle of PMTA. If you're preparing for the pre-market application, you're probably having someone develop what would be considered health documents for your product. Now, at this point, FDA is not requesting any of that information be submitted for the health document notification because they're only looking back in time to 2009. Eventually, they may look further, into 2010, 2011, in which case what you should be doing as you move forward if you are developing health documents is keeping track of what you're developing and being prepared to eventually submit those to FDA in the future. And you don't have to do it via eSubmitter. You could simply submit the notification to FDA in the form, in the paper form, with a cover letter. And if you need help with that, we're happy to help you. So, with that, we've crossed into, we've passed the 2:30 mark here on our end, East Coast. So we are going to log off. But if you have we hope this was helpful. We're going to be making this recording available along with the slides. We'll send them out to you once that's ready in a couple of days. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, we go back and show you our contact information. Where is it? Can I find it?
It's because that's the last page. That's the last slide was behind you. So if you just scroll all the way up in there, it'll get you there.
Was right there. Here's our contact information. And again, if you're interested in looking at a lot more detail, please feel free to take a look at the Vapor Symposium website being hosted by Vape Mentors, www.fdalaws.us/symposium2017. You can see the full agenda from our symposium from a couple of months ago, where we talked about some of these requirements in much more detail and a lot more, including PMTA. You can take a look at that and purchase a replay of that. But if you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to work with you in answering and helping you all through this process. So thank you, and I hope this was useful, and I look forward to talking to you all at some point soon.
Thanks so much, everyone.